Hello, everybody. Today, an interview with welcome to this channel. I am receiving today Gloriane Blais, who's going to come and speak with us of an important cause. It's tomorrow, Wednesday, the 12th of July. She will be depositing, I believe, or speaking to the court of an application of unconstitutionality for a ticket for a masque, Wednesday, the 12th of July. So it's very important. Without further ado, I am welcoming Gloriane, who's going to speak with us. Hello, Gloriane. Hello, Danielle. Hello, everybody. So perhaps I made an error by saying it or not saying it. Can you explain to us what an application in unconstitutionality for a ticket of wearing a mask would be? Yes, in fact, it's an application of unconstitutionality. I would like to specify, as I said at my interview with Samuel Grenier, that everything that I'm discussing today concerns only my causes. So in terms of judiciary research, all of my causes in terms of the radiation that I received with the Quebec law bar. So this is concerning the non-wearing of a mask and why I received a ticket. I also said when I was a lawyer, so I can repeat what a lawyer said, so it's not necessary to make an request of an application with the syndicate of the barreau. This is, I'm too strategic to do an illegal exercise. So you're very familiar with the judiciary domain and with health law and anti-corruption. Yes, I was responsible for civil and medical victims. Usually these causes are taken care of outside of the courts, and I did one with obstetrics. It's very difficult to arrive at conclusions, but I managed to prove one in front of the Superior Court, the Court of Appeal, and on the request of authorization on behalf of the doctor. We won at all levels, and it's a cause which is very important. I'm known by all professors in health law within Quebec. It's really an important cause in Quebec that took place. And so, and I also have higher certificates in law in Quebec. And as I'm an expert in health law, I'm still a jurist. The only thing that I can't do is that I can't give any legal counsel or represent judiciary or legally another individual, but all of my knowledge I can use for myself for my own cases. So I remain a citizen and I'm a jurist in the sense that professors in law, and not all lawyers, several of them that I know personally, withdrew from the Barreau du Québec. They only analyze law now, but so I cannot give any legal recommendations. But now we're discussing my mask ticket that I received during a protest on the 20th of December 2020. You remember the video that I recorded? I took an evening to a night to think about it because it put at risk my profession, my career, but I took those risks because I thought it was terrible where we had reached as a society, the point at which we had reached as a society, because I was saying, wow, that's enough in terms of the governments. I don't know if you're working unconsciously or with malevolence, but either you're being manipulated or you're accepting to be manipulated. And at a certain point, you must distance yourselves. So corruption, when we speak of corruption, it's not necessarily malevolence. It's not, in terms of a government, not to protect oneself sufficiently from influences that would not serve the people. Because as soon as, when we're speaking within a public institution, whether it's legal to make laws or executive decrees for recommendations in health, or judiciary, the third power, constitutional power, these three powers, these are public institutions. And from the time that we work for public institutions, we owe it to ourselves to work for the good of the people, and only for the good of the people, and not for private interests. And so if we accept to be manipulated for private interest, or that unconsciously we are manipulated when we don't know whether it's malevolent or unconscious. It remains that at a certain point in December, when it had been several months that this false pandemic was restraining us from our rights, at a certain point it was enough. And what was outrageous for me during this protest on the 20th of December 2020, it was my first protest. I was in a cause that took me all the way to the Supreme Court against Quebec government society. So I was very busy in 2020. I couldn't protest. I was working really hard, but I went to this first protest for myself against the sanitary or Nazi sanitary, or excuse me for the lapsus, in December 2020. I was very surprised because it's a constitutional right to participate in a pacific protest. It's not violent. The protesters are not violent. They're children. It was joyful. All of the protests were pacific from the very first all the way to the last. The only parts where there was violence were with Antifa groups. I don't know who was paying for them. They were there to make trouble. They were often stopped, put into trucks, but then there were no follow-ups. They just disappeared and they came back to the next protest. All of the protests were pacific. I want to remind people of this in 2023. We're in July 2023. For those who are arriving and who are discovering all of a sudden what took place, well, please know that there are other cases in Canada at this time, amongst others, within the Canadian Army, the constitutionality of the mandates, and for the effects of the pick as also. There's already somebody who is taking to court the English CBC for disinformation, misinformation concerning this. So please note that in 2023, there are more and more cases all over Canada, which are pushing, and Quebec is not an exception. There are still pending cases in suspension or in underway. But in terms of these cases, it's very important that you're participating, and thank you for having stood up, because many lawyers, of course, could have stood up. They didn't do it because of fears of reprisals. You did it. And all of those who denigrate you for having done so, well, I'll say for next time, why don't you stand up? Let's see what happens. Because if everybody had stood up, we wouldn't be here now today. Of course, the decrees that were authorized by the Executive Council, authorized every 2 weeks and renewed without any accounts. There were no accounts given for those who are arriving in 2023. These were arbitrary decisions. And for those who are also arriving in 2023 or learning something new, yes, pharmaceutical lobbying exists. And you were speaking of corruption earlier. There are several forms of corruption, but know that the traffic of influence is one of them. Our governments, were they aware of what was happening? Well, it seems that perhaps yes, and lobbying exists. So honestly, the governments will have to respond to this. But speak to us of your application. What are you expecting from your application tomorrow? Yes, I'll just make a quick parenthesis in terms of what you just said, and then I'll answer your question. As you said earlier, I'm an expert in anti-corruption. We don't need to be a lawyer to be an expert in anti-corruption. And furthermore, I participated in a conference in the International Bar Association in São Paulo in Brazil with experts from Washington, London, the UK, Paris, experts in anti-corruption. And it's unanimous that there is corruption in all the countries of the world at different degrees for each country. But to say, oh, the most amazing country in the world, in Canada, there's none of that. We are closing our eyes and we're living in ignorance or absolute innocence. It would be really to not take our responsibilities as adults, as parents, as grandparents, aunts, or friends of children who we leaving society to. Furthermore, to say that it's very good that you stood up, I want to tell you that in Quebec, there are 28,000 lawyers, but in Canada, we could multiply this by probably 10 easily. I don't have the number, but yes. But what I want to tell you is that it's not over. we're only just beginning exactly to stand up. And so what I'm doing right now and what I want to expose to you is more that there are lawyers who are going to read my proceedings that I put forward on the social networks. More there'll be lawyers in Quebec, in Canada, or elsewhere in the world, jurists and lawyers who will learn about what I'm doing and who will slowly begin to speak. Yes, the impact of what you are doing goes beyond Quebec. Absolutely. Because, in fact, for the application in unconstitutionality, there are several reasons for which, until now, it hasn't been the applications for unconstitutionality on mask tickets fell each time on summary application with the Quebec prosecutor here in Quebec. It's for several reasons. Sometimes we were looking for little things to chip at. We can't be perfect in the proceedings, especially when we're not a jurist, but even when we're a jurist, we're not perfect. I want to highlight that. But of course, there's one aspect that I consider that for myself in my writing, I considered that I had to go larger. We wanted to show that we weren't touching everything, that we knew what we were discussing, or for different reasons. We wanted to name, okay, my mask ticket that I received because of this decree. So to go so precisely, so specifically, I think this is an error for several reasons, which I won't explain to you now because it would take too long. But I consider that in terms of moral principle and judiciary principle, I must, and this is what I'm doing in my application, this is what I will plead. I must plead the unconstitutionality, of the law on public health, not only the decrees. What I say is that as long as we have governments which are using a law such as this to oppress the people, so who are telling us what to do with our health, whilst perhaps we would be better off rather than doing all of this to preserve the health system, we might be better making our own choices as individuals, free human beings and dignified human beings with an inviolability, the inviolability of the body. And you've mentioned it. We did this to save the health system. Well, June 2023 has this healthcare system been saved. We did all of this. We made a big dome of collusion over Quebec, and it's the values that are inversed. The healthcare system should be there to protect our health. And we've reached the point where we're destroying our health by taking different experimental products to protect the healthcare system, meaning to protect the doctors who are saying anything and who are not saying the information which is just and truthful in terms of certain products or in terms of certain secondary effects. So what I say is, yes, just a note on that. Yesterday, I was discussing with somebody who mentioned, I was speaking of the example of Peru, which are in confinement for 3 months for cases of syndrome Guillain-Barré. And now there are some in Quebec who are beginning, and somebody came to my post and said, hey, I've got that too. And then I shared the Quebec link to complain about the effects and their doctor was refusing this. And the doctor was saying, oh no, there's nothing that proves that it is this. And the doctors don't want to. And know that for Lyme disease, for instance, it's a battle also to have them admit that it existed, even in Quebec. No, the doctors don't have all the infused science. No, they don't know all science. And reports are read all around the world thanks to the internet. We can read medical reports from Europe, the United States, in English mostly, yes, in English, but also in French. There were some in Europe that were coming out. So the refusal to be informed, to inform oneself with these medical reports, do you think that this can play in the causes also? Because the reports existed. Or do we simply say it's uniquely what our doctors in Quebec say that is the Bible finally? So what happens elsewhere, we don't take into consideration, we don't discuss it, and we don't judge from it. Well, as for myself, in fact, what I will do in terms of the proceedings is to present experts who are outside of Quebec, because we experienced a pandemic, a worldwide epidemic, according to the authorities. So we should use expertise from other experts elsewhere than in Quebec. That's the logic. And so I have no jurisprudence in all of my expertise in medical responsibility. I don't have any knowledge. Perhaps a jurist could transmit this information to me if I never saw it anyway. I have no knowledge that the tribunals established that an expertise from outside Canada is worth anything less. Everybody who said that the tribunals said this, I never read this in jurisprudence. So we have to be careful about saying, oh, the tribunals don't want this. Our expertise outside of the province, I never read that. I read other reasons to reject the recourses, judiciary reasons or choices in the pleadings. As I'm telling you, I am pleading, I'm writing that I contest the constitutionality. I am pleading unconstitutionality of the public health law completely, not just the decree. So I won't, this will be done in terms of the proof. But what I want to say in terms of the doctors, I'm not saying that all doctors are no good. That would be like a lack of discernment. From the moment that we begin developing our critical spirit, because of course the other point is to maintain our discernment. When I was a lawyer in medical responsibility, and since 2022, I am no longer, what I saw we had as data, this is before the pandemic, because after the pandemic, everything changed. The second cause in the US for death was medical error. In Quebec, there are medical errors also. We're not talking about 2, 3, or 4. Can you tell the number if you have it for Quebec? Oh, I don't have it. But it was, I think from memory, it was thousands of medical errors in Quebec. Oh, well, of course. But what I want to say is that we stop thinking that this such and such a profession, these are priests, they have no emotions, they have no interests. They have no interests that could be contrary to the interest of the patient or the client, that we stop thinking that any profession is protected in a bubble as if they were gods. This is not discernment. Discernment is to say each human being can be fallible, and the more a human being develops their courage, because integrity and courage is essential for integrity, the more the human being develops their courage, this is a muscle, the more they're propitious to integrity. And this is such in any profession. We are fallible, but in any profession, we can arrive at an integrity which can be almost perfect. In terms of the application for unconstitutionality that I'll be pleading tomorrow, I'm pleading an application that I deposited a few weeks or a few months ago. I'm pleading an application in unconstitutionality on the basis that the Quebec prosecutor is depositing an application in summary register. And this is where all the other cases fell in Quebec. So to plead, if this passes following this audience, that means that we plead unconstitutionality, but with my application, which is well written as an expert in health law, we understand, the proceedings in October 2023, the date is already set. And what does it mean if the medical health law, because of course it means that if I do this, I have to be ready to go to the appeal court of Quebec and beyond. Yes, because we're starting to see the impact of what we're doing. Well, we can't do such a file without being prepared to go to the Supreme Court of Canada. And I've been to the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court of Canada, other times in my career. So it's something that of which is part of my knowledge, my expertise. So what I'm telling you is that if we move beyond this on the 12th of July, perhaps we'll have a judgment within a month. So around mid-August, if we have a judgment that doesn't reject the application of the prosecutor, it means that they're retaining my application in unconstitutionality for the proceedings in October 2023. This means that we're changing grounds and that my case can reach new precedents. It's not just for me, Gloriane Blais. It would be easier for me to just pay the ticket. Up to date, there's the bailiff costs and my time. So while I'm working on this, I'm not working at Maxi. So that's it. So what I'm telling you is that it would cost me less to pay for my ticket. That's obvious. And so what I'm telling you is that after it's the proceedings, the court case, And after the court case, of course, we're going to the appeal court in the Supreme Court. It's clear that if a judge gives us what we want, which is to either completely drop the public health law, of course, we'll go into the appeal court. And of course, if a judge accepts this appeal in unconstitutionality, then I'll go to the Court of Appeal immediately. Of course, I have to look at penal law. I'm used to civil law. So this means that we have to be prepared to go to the appeal court and the Supreme Court. And why am I addressing? I've been not very present in the last year because I was working on my files. But when we work on my application for unconstitutionality or radiation, when I'm working on these files, 90% of the work is Monk's work. The pleading must be well done. If it's not well done, we're against these big players. As I've told you, I was representing victims in medical fraud. In medical fraud, it's not just the lawyers representing the doctors. It's not just those who are in the audience rooms. There are people working in the shadows in the offices. So you have a major experience. And I have a question here. Would there not be documents, cemented documents from the Citizens Commission, which could be helpful to you? Would this be something that would be helpful if these were deposited as proof? Could this help? Well, at this stage of the 12th of July, the audience, it has no pertinence that I would have, how can I say, proof on this, because the application to be rejected is founded on the applications that we use in civil law. I'm very familiar with this. This is really my expertise. So it's really to found ourselves on what is written in the proceedings. We take the proceedings as recognized facts, as if they were true, and we're more in debates in law, legal debates. So in terms of the proceedings, the case, I won't stop in sermon declarations under oath. Perhaps the National Citizen Inquiry allowed me to know somebody who I didn't know, and then I'll listen to their testimonial and say, oh, that's interesting. I'll ask them to come to the case. This is a historical case. This is not going to go between, it's not going to go invisible. And my objective to bring down to the ground the law on health, the health law, so that we can take care of ourselves as we wish to, because the government's, the public health law is too broadly written. And it means that since 2020, the governments have been applying it in a manner which is very abusive and unreasonable, and it's not justified in a free and democratic society. So my objective is to bring down the public health law. But you understand the precedent that this will make if the public health law falls by the Supreme Court of Canada in a few years. If it falls, it means that the public health laws everywhere in the world, including the World Health Organization, will fall. Do you understand the precedent? So effectively, with the presence of the World Health Organization in Canada, politically, the individuals and new government can annul the intervention of the World Health Organization in Canada. That's one thing. Yes, but we won't hope for that up to date. Yes, exactly. Those who are there, almost those who are there currently, there's no change in the horizon on this subject. But I won't go into this. No, me neither. We're in the judiciary. Yes, in the judiciary, it's important because it has an impact and it will be seen elsewhere in the world. And also, I remind you that these cases, you were speaking of the public health, but Health Canada, which is preparing to ban natural healthcare products, all of a sudden it's become a priority that they wish to control natural health products for the benefit of the pharmaceuticals. Well, you'll see Bill Gates for investments. I don't enjoy speaking of Bill Gates because it's really the N word. It's yes, but it's not the N word, but it's the C word, because these are words. Yes, we can make note of things. Well, because I think it's defamatory, but so I don't even want to name him. But the people who appropriated this word didn't understand the significance of what it is to ostracize. And ostracization means that the other is not in consciousness. has closed ears. So if we use it, it means that we're accepting that the other is closing their ears in terms of the message that we want to deliver them to help them become aware of reality. All that to say that if I come back to the law on public health, it was used during the COVID times. We understand that if it was applied in this manner during COVID, whilst there was no pandemic, I'm not saying there was no COVID, I'm saying there was no pandemic. It's very different. So because the pandemic, go and look at the statisticians. There are some who are bringing out the data, and it's clear that there was no pandemic. Could there have been a pandemic? And at the end of 3 weeks, we realized in 2020 that there was none, that it was not so virulent. Well, yes, but it's because they had to ask themselves questions when we understood that the situation was not so serious, which they did not do. Did they go into unjustified fear unconsciously, or was it because they were influenced by lobbyists, as we were speaking earlier? We don't know. It's not important. But if governments use this unconsciously or malevolently, the public health law, this is for COVID, but it's also for the future. Do you wish that your children, because the public health law allows them to oblige us. They didn't use it, but to oblige obligatory vaccination and injection, that they wished us to believe that it was a vaccine, over effective, even very effective. They said it was a vaccine under false representation. Yes, they were experimenting still, and I will remind you that it's not even over. The study for pregnant women at Moderna should finish in December 2023, so it's not finished yet. Bill Gates has the right to speak of vaccines, being a computer nerd. I want to remind you that this is interesting. The Minister of Health, Public Health in Canada, is an economist. The Minister of Health in Quebec is an accountant. So in biology, I would like to know the profile of studies in biology. Briefly, we have a whole program to look forward to in the future. So your application is tomorrow. Will people be able to assist it live, virtually, or in presence? Only in presence. In the other audiences, in terms of this instance, I was presenting before an application and divulgation of the proof. All of this, I was able to do it virtually, but the judge last time required that I be present. Probably they want to interrogate me. So in this situation, I'll be there. Everybody will be there. I don't see the possibility that there'll be a Teams. The Teams is only there. And where will this be? It's at the Palais de Justice de Montréal, the Montreal Courthouse. 3.102, 3.102. And I just want to tell you that at the Palais de Justice de Montréal, there are security measures which are very strong. You have to foresee about 30 minutes to get in, and it begins at 9:30, and it's not a roll call, meaning it's 9:30 all the day exclusively for my case. It's not clear that it will be ended at the end of the day. So it's really a very, very important day because it will determine if we continue on the proceedings or not. And for myself also, if we need to go further with the Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court. So it's very important on Wednesday. And why I'm discussing it with you now is that I find that it's important that the population be aware, be informed of this. It's a very important case given my competence and my integrity, my competence in health law. There are serious possibilities that it will be able to continue. And for this, I wish to inform you, as I did yesterday with Samuel Grenier, that I need your financial support. But the first question that you must ask yourselves is, do you, as human beings, parents or not parents, but protectors of children, meaning future human beings of a future society, do you, as human beings, in all of your consciousness, do you wish that I pay for my ticket and stop there? It's as you wish. Or that I continue. So if you would like me to continue, I ask you to support me. It is not true that I have to sacrifice myself financially as I did it in the last year, because I didn't want to have to explain everything in detail all the time, because it takes time and energy. But now this is a time when you need to reflect on whether you wish me to continue or whether you wish me to pay for my ticket. It's not a threat because the government machines have budgets which are phenomenal to fight against the citizens. These are from your taxes. Yes, when people tell us, oh, you're asking for more money, more donations, well, will you say one day, oh, you're asking for more taxes? You know, I'll say it's the same money. So what I'm telling you is that I have young children. I shouldn't have to sacrifice their lives, their childhoods, because I'm thinking of all the children, all human beings, future human beings. But of course, I have a social consciousness since I was very young. I'm like that. And that's why you're injustice. In fact, yes, because I chose my law profession because of the justice. I was surprised when I went into law, and really, I was more than surprised. I was on the floor because to see that people weren't there for that. They were there because they weren't good enough to get into medicine. Well, I was good enough to get into medicine. I did very well in school, but all this to say, or to have a career, to have a title, I said, if I could have been a lawyer with a title, with a professional education diploma from secondary, I would have been a lawyer. I wasn't looking to have a title, you know, of any type of standing. No. However, of course, I have the right to live decently. For instance, now I'm going tomorrow to the audience, just as an example. Well, I'm taking the train. I'm taking it at 5:25, my train from Quebec to Montreal in economy mode. Ideally, it would have been in business class, which is not that much more expensive. What I did as a lawyer, you have costs. We have to remind the people that it's not just to survive. On top of that, it's all the costs. At a certain point, you have to eat, you have to travel. As you say, the time that you're there, you're not there to doing other things such as work. Yes, there are people who were in the movement, they were active, but now they no longer have the need to be as active. They can go and work. I agree with that. Those who say go and work, but I have to files like this, it's every day you have to work on them. I'm going to the beach with my children or to the playground. I bring my jurisprudence book. I bring documents that I have to read. I do this constantly to ensure that I have time to reflect on things. It's not just reading time, it's analysis, reflection, strategy. How will I move this forward so that the judge understands very, very clearly? It's not manipulation. I'm in the truth, but I'm not in a theater play. Yes, I'll give two examples for people. What you're doing, Gloriane, it makes me think of several examples in the life that we've had. There have been several judiciary battles that were won, sometimes by one lone person, thanks to their perseverance for continuing. Because people would want you to drop it, it's clear. Well, that's why they removed my title. Yes, I encourage you to continue, and I will be happy to contribute. Also, it's a contribution for the hope of a future. That's it. Josette is saying it so clearly. A contribution for the hope of a free and democratic future society. I'll give you two examples. You saw the movies. They're extraordinary stories that we find at a certain point. Erin Brockovich, who was a woman who fought for a company that was polluting the waters, and a civil action, which was also based on a true story of a lawyer at a certain point who almost lost everything also. Well, they almost lost everything. A civil suit, which was a company, a large firm, painting firm. No, it was Teflon. Teflon, yes. Briefly, it was polluting. They were putting the Teflon directly in the water. It was killing people. Briefly, they made movies with such examples, with just one cause. With a mask ticket, do you understand that a mask ticket, this tool can allow us to drop worldwide the public health law? Now you're saying she's crazy to think that. Well, I defended one case that created jurisprudence on other things. Yeah, that's it. Because the system of jurisprudence, we have to understand that jurisprudence it makes things explode. It makes waves. And finally, we only have 2 minutes left. I just want to say, in terms of the example of the train, I just want it to be visual. When I went to plead, I always took, and now you'll say, oh, she's giving herself luxury. I always took to be the most in shape, because when I'm pleading, I have to be in shape, like an athlete has to be in shape to perform. I always took a room next to the Palais de Justice to be in good shape, but then I wasn't able to. I'm going to take the train at 5:25 tomorrow morning, meaning I'm going to get up at 3:30 to go and take the train. So it's going to involve a certain fatigue. Well, you're saying, oh, well, she'll still be able to do it. Yes, but we're talking about fine law, testimonials. I have no right to error. I'm working against the big players. What I'm saying is I need financial support so that it be even what might say enjoyable to go to defend for you, defend the people, because I'm no longer a lawyer. I'm no longer a member of the Ordre du Barreau du Québec. I'm no longer attached to them, but I'm still continuing my proceedings on that, but it's almost over. I finished my appeal brief in that file, but with my competencies and my expertise, I can be the warrior of the people in judiciary terms. With this little case with the mask ticket, as a defendant, it can have a very important carryover, and I believe in it. So do you wish me to continue this contestation on the law of the public health in terms of the constitutionality all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada? So if you say yes, then you must accept in these circumstances that no matter what happens on the 2nd of July, on the 12th of July, you can't just say, oh, it didn't work, oh no, her things are not going to work. It's persistence in law, perseverance. We have a system that is slow. We have to say it. It's unpleasant. Before the pandemic, it was already known it wasn't going well. But now look, you're in it. When you're in it, you have a case. You can go far. In the name of all the listeners, I thank you, Gloriane. This video will also be played in English on the English channel. So as soon as it's available in English, I'll share it also on the English networks, Global Freedom, for instance. And this interview, which is directly on YouTube, will also be shared on all of the platforms. Share it to a maximum. Gloriane, thank you for what you're doing. Standing up, it's gloriane.blais at protonmail.com. And the answer is Debout. Thank you very much, Gloriane. It's my pleasure. Thank you, Danielle. We'll see you again soon.